The ship Starbound Pioneer moved slowly through space toward the new planet. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge and looked out at the blue and green world below them. It was beautiful, with white clouds swirling around it like cotton candy. "How long until we can land?" Jake asked his crew. Dr. Lisa Chong looked up from her science station. She was the ship's expert on alien life. Her black hair was tied back in a neat ponytail, and she wore the standard blue uniform of the Earth Space Service. "The air is good for humans," she said. "We can breathe it without masks. The gravity is a little stronger than Earth, but not too much." Pete Williams, the ship's engineer, was checking the landing systems. He was a big man with rough hands from years of fixing machines. "The ship is ready to land, Captain. All systems are working fine." Amy Foster sat at the communications desk. She was the youngest person on the ship, at only 19 years old. Her blonde hair fell in loose curls around her shoulders, and her green eyes were bright with excitement. This was her first mission to a new planet. She had studied languages and animal behavior in school before joining the space program. "Captain," Amy said, turning in her chair, "I'm picking up some kind of signals from the planet. They're not like any language I know, but they have patterns. I think someone down there is trying to talk." Jake nodded. This was what they had hoped for. Earth had been looking for other intelligent life for hundreds of years. Now they might have found it. "Take us down, Pete," Jake ordered. "Find a good place to land, away from any cities or settlements. We don't want to scare anyone." The ship descended through the atmosphere. The planet's surface came into view. There were thick forests of strange trees that looked like they were made of crystal. The leaves sparkled in the sunlight like diamonds. Between the forests were wide grasslands, where herds of unknown animals moved like shadows. Pete found a clearing near the edge of one of the crystal forests. The ship landed with a soft thud, and the engines went quiet. For a moment, everyone was silent. They were the first humans to set foot on this world. "Okay, people," Jake said. "We follow standard first contact rules. We go out in a group. We keep our weapons on stun only. We try to look friendly, but not weak. Lisa, you take the lead on studying any life forms we meet. Amy, you try to communicate if we find anyone intelligent." The 4 crew members put on their equipment and walked to the ship's exit. The door opened with a hiss, and they stepped out onto alien soil. The air smelled like flowers and something else they couldn't identify. It was warm, and a gentle breeze moved through the crystal trees. They had been walking for about 10 minutes when Amy stopped. "Wait," she whispered. "Do you hear that?" Everyone listened. There was a low growling sound coming from the forest. It was deep and powerful, not like any Earth animal they knew. "Stay together," Jake said, pulling out his stun weapon. The others did the same. From between the crystal trees came the strangest beings they had ever seen. They walked on 2 legs like humans, but they were much taller. The smallest one was at least 7 feet tall. They had bodies covered in thick fur that was gray and black like wolves. Their faces were long with sharp teeth that showed when they opened their mouths. Their hands had long claws that looked like they could cut through metal. But the most surprising thing was that they wore clothes and carried weapons. These were not just animals. They were intelligent beings with their own technology. The leader of the group was the biggest one. He was over 8 feet tall, with scars across his face and arms. He wore armor that looked like it was made from the same crystal as the trees. In his hands was a weapon that glowed with blue energy. Amy stepped forward slowly. She had studied how to approach dangerous animals, and these beings reminded her of wolves. "Hello," she said in a soft voice. "We come in peace. We want to be friends." She held up her hands to show she wasn't holding a weapon. Lisa and Pete did the same. Jake kept his weapon ready, but pointed it at the ground. The big leader made a sound that was half growl, half laugh. He said something in a language that sounded like barking and howling mixed together. Amy tried to repeat some of the sounds, but the leader's expression changed. His eyes narrowed, and he showed more of his sharp teeth. "I don't think that worked," Amy whispered. The leader raised his weapon and pointed it at Jake. He barked out what sounded like commands to his group. The other wolf-like beings spread out in a circle around the humans. "I think we're in trouble," Pete said quietly. Jake raised his weapon. "Easy now. We don't want to fight." But the wolf beings didn't understand. To them, Jake's action looked like a threat. The leader snarled and fired his weapon. A bolt of blue energy shot toward Jake, but he dove to the side just in time. "Take cover," Jake shouted. The humans ran toward some large rocks, while the wolf beings fired more energy bolts at them. Pete fired back with his stun weapon, and one of the smaller wolf beings fell down, unconscious but alive. "We need to get back to the ship," Lisa called out. Amy was trying to understand what had gone wrong. These beings seemed angry, but she didn't think they were evil. Something about their behavior reminded her of dogs that were scared or defending their territory. The fight continued for several minutes. The humans were careful to only use stun settings on their weapons, but the wolf beings were using full power. Their energy bolts burned holes in the crystal trees and left black marks on the rocks. Finally, Jake threw a small device that created a bright flash and a loud noise. While the wolf beings were confused, the humans ran back toward their ship. As they ran, Amy looked back. She saw that some of the wolf beings had been hurt by their own weapons when the energy bolts bounced off the rocks. One of them, a younger-looking one with lighter fur, was limping badly. Dark liquid that looked like blood was dripping from his claws onto the ground. "Wait," Amy called to her crewmates. "Some of them are hurt." "We can't help them now," Jake said, pulling her along. "We need to get to safety first." They made it back to the ship and sealed the door behind them. Everyone was breathing hard and shaking from the adrenaline. "Well, that didn't go as planned," Pete said, checking his equipment for damage. Lisa was already at her science station, analyzing the readings they had gotten during the encounter. "They're definitely intelligent," she said. "Their technology is different from ours, but it's advanced. Those weapons were more powerful than our stun guns." Amy sat at her communication station, but she wasn't listening to signals from space. She was thinking about the injured wolf being she had seen. In her mind, she could still see him limping away, leaving drops of blood behind. "Captain," she said suddenly, "I think we made a mistake." Jake looked at her. "What do you mean?" "I don't think they were trying to hurt us at first. I think they were testing us. Like how dogs sometimes growl and show their teeth to see if you're going to run away or fight back. They shot at us, Amy," Pete pointed out. "Only after we pointed our weapons at them," Amy replied. "I think they saw that as a challenge. And now some of them are hurt because of the fight." Jake sighed and sat down in his captain's chair. "So what do you suggest we do?" Amy looked out the ship's window toward the crystal forest. Somewhere out there was an injured being who needed help. Her grandmother had always told her that hurt creatures were the most dangerous, but also the most in need of kindness. "I think we need to try again," she said. "But next time we do it differently." 3 days passed since the fight with the wolf beings. Amy could not stop thinking about the injured one she had seen limping away. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the dark blood dripping from his claws onto the crystal ground. The crew spent those days studying the planet from inside their ship. Lisa worked on analyzing the alien technology they had seen. Pete fixed the small damage to their ship from the energy bolts. Jake wrote reports to send back to Earth about their first contact, but Amy sat at her station and listened. She heard the wolf beings talking to each other in the distance. Their howls and barks carried through the crystal forest. Sometimes the sounds seemed sad, and Amy wondered if they were mourning their injured. On the third morning, Amy made a decision. "Captain," she said, walking up to Jake's chair, "I want to go back out there." Jake looked up from his reports. "Amy, we've talked about this. It's too dangerous. Those beings are hostile." "I don't think they are," Amy said. "I think they were just scared and confused, like wild animals when they meet humans for the first time." Lisa turned from her science. "Station. Amy, those aren't animals. They have advanced weapons and technology. They knew exactly what they were doing when they attacked us." "But did they really attack us?" Amy asked. "Or were they defending their territory? Think about it. We landed on their planet without asking. We walked into their forest. From their point of view, we were the invaders." Pete shook his head. "Even? If that's true, it doesn't change the fact that they tried to kill us." Amy had been thinking about this for 3 days. She had studied animal behavior in school, and everything about the wolf beings reminded her of pack animals. What if they weren't trying to kill us? What if they were testing us to see how strong we are? "That's a big risk to take based on a guess," Jake said. Amy sat down across from her captain. "Sir, I know it sounds crazy, but I think I can help. That injured one I saw, he's still out there. If I can help him, maybe the others will see that we're not enemies." "Absolutely not," Jake said firmly. "I'm not sending you out there alone to get yourself killed." "Then don't send me," Amy said. "Let me volunteer. This is my choice." Jake stared at her for a long moment. Amy was young, but she had good instincts. She had been right about the communication signals when they first arrived. Maybe she was right about this too. "What exactly are you planning to do?" he asked. Amy held up a small medical kit. "I'm going to find the injured one and try to help him. If he attacks me, I'll retreat back to the ship. But if he lets me help, maybe we can start building trust." "This is insane," Pete muttered, but Lisa was looking thoughtful. "Actually, from a scientific standpoint, it might work. Many species form bonds through caretaking behavior. If Amy can establish herself as a helper rather than a threat, it could change their perception of all humans." Jake was quiet for several minutes. Finally, he sighed. "If you're going to do this, you take a communicator, emergency beacon, and a stun weapon. At the first sign of real danger, you get out of there." Amy smiled. "Thank you, Captain." An hour later, Amy stood at the edge of the crystal forest. She had changed out of her uniform and into simple brown clothes that wouldn't stand out. The medical kit was slung over her shoulder, and the communicator was clipped to her belt. She followed the trail of blood drops that she had seen 3 days ago. The dark stains on the crystal ground were easy to follow. They led deeper into the forest, where the crystal trees grew so thick that only small beams of sunlight could get through. Amy walked carefully and quietly. She had learned to move this way when she was young and used to help her grandfather track injured deer in the woods back on Earth. Every few steps, she stopped to listen. After walking for almost an hour, she heard something. It was a low whimpering sound, like a dog in pain. Amy followed the sound until she came to a small clearing where several crystal trees had fallen down. Under the fallen trees, she saw him, the young wolf being from the fight 3 days ago. He was trapped with his leg pinned under a heavy crystal trunk. His fur was matted with dried blood, and his breathing was shallow and fast. Amy approached slowly. When the wolf being saw her, his eyes went wide. He tried to move away, but the fallen tree had him trapped. He snarled and showed his sharp teeth, trying to look dangerous, even though he was clearly in pain. "Easy," Amy said softly, the same way she used to talk to scared animals back home. "I'm not going to hurt you. I want to help." The wolf being said something in his barking language. Amy didn't understand the words, but the tone was clear. He was telling her to stay away. Amy sat down on the ground a few feet away from him. She opened her medical kit and laid out the supplies where he could see them. Bandages, antiseptic, pain medicine, and other healing tools. "See?" she said, holding up the bandages. "These are for helping, not hurting." The wolf being watched her carefully. His amber eyes were intelligent and alert, even though he was in pain. Amy could see that his injured leg was swollen and bleeding. Without help, he might die from infection. She moved a little closer. The wolf being growled again, but it was weaker this time. He was getting tired from fighting the pain. "I know you're scared," Amy said, "but I've helped hurt animals before. I know what I'm doing." She reached out slowly toward his injured leg. The wolf being snapped at her with his teeth, but Amy was ready for this. She pulled her hand back just in time. "Ouch," she said, even though he hadn't actually touched her. "That must sting, you naughty creature. It looks like you hurt your..." Pause. Something strange happened. The wolf being stopped growling. He tilted his head to one side, like a confused dog. Amy's tone had been gentle but firm, like a mother scolding a child who had gotten into trouble. Amy used this moment of confusion to move closer. She reached out again, this time toward the fallen tree instead of his leg. "Let me see if I can move this," she said. The tree was too heavy for her to lift, but she could see that it was balanced on some smaller branches. If she could move those branches, the tree might shift enough to free his leg. The wolf being watched as Amy worked. She used a piece of metal from her kit as a lever to move the branches. Slowly, the heavy tree began to shift. "Almost got it," Amy said, breathing hard from the effort. "Just a little more." The tree moved enough to free the wolf being's leg. He pulled it out quickly and tried to stand, but the leg wouldn't support his weight. He fell back down with a yelp of pain. Amy could see that the leg was badly hurt. It might even be broken. Without thinking, she moved toward him with the medical supplies. The wolf being raised his clawed hand to swipe at her, but Amy caught his wrist gently. "None of that," she said firmly. "You're hurt, and I'm going to fix it whether you like it or not." The wolf being stared at her in amazement. This small human female had just grabbed his clawed hand like it was nothing. She wasn't afraid of him at all. In his culture, only pack leaders showed such confidence around warriors. Amy began cleaning the wound on his leg. The wolf being whimpered, but he didn't try to stop her. The antiseptic stung, and she could see him gritting his teeth. "I know it hurts," Amy said soothingly, "but it will feel better soon. You've been very brave." As she worked, Amy started talking to fill the silence. She told him about her childhood dog, Rex, who used to get hurt all the time from running through the woods. She talked about how she had learned to bandage cuts and treat infections. The wolf being didn't understand her words, but he understood her tone. It was kind and caring, like the sounds pack mothers made when tending the injured young ones. But there was also authority in her voice, the confidence of someone who knew what they were doing. By the time Amy finished bandaging his leg, the wolf being was looking at her with new eyes. This human was not prey or enemy. She was something else entirely, something his people had no word for. Amy sat back and looked at her work. The bandage was neat and tight, and the bleeding had stopped. "There," she said. "That should help it heal properly." The wolf being tried to stand again. This time, with the bandage supporting his leg, he could put some weight on it. He looked down at the white bandage, then up at Amy. For the first time, he spoke to her without growling. The sounds were still foreign to Amy, but they seemed gentler, almost like he was saying thank you. Amy smiled and packed up her medical kit. "You're welcome." she said. But you need to stay off that leg for a few days, or it won't heal right. She stood up to leave, but the wolf being made a soft whining sound. When Amy looked back, he was holding out something to her. It was a small crystal, perfectly clear and shaped like a star. Amy took the crystal carefully. It was warm to the touch and seemed to glow with its own inner light. "Thank you," she said. "It's beautiful." The wolf being nodded once, then limped away into the deeper forest. Amy watched him go, feeling like something important had just happened. She had made contact with an alien being, not as a conqueror or diplomat, but as a healer. As she walked back to the ship, Amy didn't know that she was being watched. Hidden in the crystal trees, other wolf beings had seen everything. Word was already spreading through their pack about the strange human female who treated injured warriors like wayward cubs. The first step toward understanding had been taken, and it happened not through weapons or words, but through simple kindness. Amy returned to the ship with the glowing crystal in her hand. Her crewmates were waiting for her at the airlock, their faces showing worry and relief. "Thank goodness you're safe," Jake said, checking her for injuries. "We heard some sounds from the forest. We thought something had happened to you." "Something did happen," Amy said, showing them the crystal. "But it was good. I helped the injured one, and he gave me this." Lisa took the crystal and examined it closely. "This is incredible. The molecular structure is unlike anything I've ever seen. It's generating its own light somehow." "More importantly," Pete said, "did you learn anything about their intentions? Are they going to attack us again?" Amy thought about the way the wolf being had looked at her when she finished treating his wound. "I don't think they want to fight us. I think they're just trying to understand us, the same way we're trying to understand them." Over the next few days, Amy found herself drawn back to the forest. She told her crewmates she was gathering plant samples for Lisa, but really she was hoping to see the injured wolf being again. She wanted to check on his wound and make sure it was healing properly. On the fourth day, she found him. He was sitting by a small stream, trying to clean his bandage. When he saw Amy approaching, he didn't growl or run away. Instead, he made a soft sound that almost seemed like a greeting. Amy sat down beside him and carefully unwrapped the bandage. The wound was healing well, but she could see that it still caused him pain when he moved. "It's looking better," she said, cleaning the wound with fresh antiseptic. "But you need to keep it clean and dry." The wolf being watched her work with curious eyes. When she was done, he pointed to himself and made a sound that was clearly his name. It sounded like Vextar to Amy's ears. "Vextar?" Amy repeated, trying to match his pronunciation. He nodded and pointed to her, tilting his head in question. "Amy," she said, pointing to herself. "My name is Amy." Vextar tried to repeat it, but it came out more like me with a slight growl. Amy laughed, and the sound seemed to surprise him. "Close enough," she said. From that day forward, Amy visited Vextar every afternoon. She brought medical supplies to change his bandage, and gradually they began to communicate. Vextar was intelligent and learned quickly. He started picking up simple English words, while Amy learned some of his language. During one visit, Amy noticed that Vextar had other injuries besides his leg. There were old scars on his arms and back, and some newer cuts that looked infected. "These need attention too," Amy said, pointing to the cuts. Vextar shook his head and made sounds that Amy understood to mean not important or not serious. "Everything is important if it's hurting you," Amy said firmly. She started cleaning the cuts with antiseptic. Vextar flinched and tried to pull away, but Amy held his arm steady. "Stop being such a baby," she said. "This needs to be done." Again, her tone seemed to confuse him. In his world, Warriors were expected to ignore pain and never show weakness. But Amy treated his discomfort with a mixture of sympathy and no-nonsense. Authority that reminded him of how pack mothers dealt with injured cubs. As the days passed, Amy learned more about Vextar and his people. She discovered that they had technology that could heal wounds much faster than human medicine, but it required special knowledge to use properly. The healing devices were complex and needed careful adjustment for each type of injury. "Show me," Amy said when Vextar tried to explain their healing technology. Vextar hesitated, then pulled out a small device that looked like a crystal wand. When he activated it, it glowed with soft blue light. He held it over his injured leg, and Amy could see the wound beginning to close. But then something went wrong. The device started sparking, and Vextar quickly turned it off. His leg was only partially healed, and now it was swollen and angry-looking. "What happened?" Amy asked. Vextar explained as best he could with his limited English and gestures. The device needed to be calibrated for each use, but his injured claws made it difficult to work the controls properly. Without precise adjustment, the healing energy could cause more damage than good. Amy studied the device carefully. It reminded her of some of the medical equipment she had used in veterinary school, just much more advanced. "Let me try," she said. Vextar shook his head. "Dangerous for not Zarthek." "I've worked with medical equipment before," Amy said, "and I've been studying how your body responds to treatment. Maybe I can figure it out." Very carefully, Amy took the healing device. It was warm in her hands and seemed to respond to her touch. She could feel it scanning her, learning about her biology. Then she held it over Vextar as leg dot at first. Nothing happened. Then Amy remembered something from her veterinary training. Different species needed different approaches to healing. She adjusted the device's settings, trying to match what she had learned about Zarthek physiology from treating Vextar. The device began to glow more steadily. Amy could see the wound on Vextar's leg starting to heal properly this time. The swelling went down, and the torn tissue began to knit together. "It's working," Amy said excitedly. Vextar watched in amazement as his leg healed completely. When Amy turned off the device, the wound was gone, leaving only a thin scar. "How did you do that?" he asked in his broken English. Amy thought about how to explain. "I think about animals, creatures, differently than most people. I try to understand what each one needs to be healthy and happy." Over the following weeks, Amy continued to visit Vextar. She used the healing device to treat his other injuries, and each time she got better at calibrating it. Vextar taught her more about his language and culture, and Amy shared stories about Earth and her life there. She told him about her childhood, growing up on a farm where she helped take care of all kinds of animals. She talked about her grandmother, who had taught her that every living thing deserved kindness and care. "My grandmother used to say that hurt creatures bite hardest when they're scared," Amy explained. "But if you're patient and gentle, they learn to trust you." Vextar listened to these stories with growing interest. In his culture, strength was measured by how much pain you could endure or how many enemies you could defeat. But Amy spoke of a different kind of strength, the power to heal and comfort others. "Your grandmother sounds like Pack Mother," Vextar said one day. "What's a Pack Mother?" Amy asked. Vextar explained that Pack Mothers were the wisest females in Zarthek society. They were responsible for caring for the young and making sure the pack stayed healthy and strong. But Pack Mothers were rare and highly respected. "You act like Pack Mother," Vextar said. "You care for injured. You make sure healing is done." "Right. You scold when someone is being foolish." Amy laughed. "I guess I do sound like a mother sometimes. I can't help it when I see someone who needs help." During one of their sessions, Amy noticed that Vextar was watching her hands as she worked with the healing device. His own claws were designed for fighting, not for the delicate work required to calibrate medical equipment. "Your hands are small but precise," he observed. "Good for healing work." Amy looked at her hands and then at his claws. "Your claws are designed for survival in a dangerous world. My hands are designed for taking care of things. Maybe that's why we can help each other." As the weeks went by, Amy realized that she was learning as much from Vextar as she was teaching him. His people had medical knowledge that was far advanced beyond human science. But they approached healing differently. They focused on rapid recovery and getting back to fighting strength. Amy's approach was more holistic. She cared about comfort and emotional well-being as much as physical healing. She noticed that when she treated Vextar's injuries with gentleness and patience, he healed faster and seemed happier. "You make healing feel safe," Vextar told her. One day, "Most Zarthak healing is painful and fast. Yours is slow, but comfortable." Amy smiled. "Sometimes slow healing is better healing. It gives your body time to recover properly." One afternoon, as Amy was finishing treating a small cut on Vextar's arm, she noticed movement in the trees around them. She looked up to see several pairs of amber eyes watching them from the shadows. "We're being watched," she whispered to Vextar. Vextar nodded. "My pack brothers. They wonder about human who heals." "Are they angry?" Amy asked. "Not angry. Curious. They see how you treat me. They see how I get better. Some have injuries too." Amy felt a flutter of excitement mixed with nervousness. "Do they want help?" Vextar made a sound that might have been laughter. "They are proud warriors. They do not ask for help, but they watch and learn." As Amy packed up her medical supplies, she thought about the watching eyes in the forest. Maybe this was how real first contact happened, not with grand speeches or formal ceremonies, but with one person helping another, one injury at a time. The crystal Vextar had given her glowed softly in her pocket, and Amy had the feeling that their simple healing sessions were creating something much bigger than either of them had imagined. Amy was treating a small infection on Vextar's shoulder when she heard heavy footsteps approaching through the crystal forest. Vextar's ears perked up, and his whole body went tense. "What's wrong?" Amy asked, continuing to clean the wound. "War Chief Zitor comes," Vextar said quietly. "My pack brother. Very important leader." Amy looked up to see the largest Zarthak she had ever encountered walking into the clearing. He was even bigger than the leader from their first meeting, with massive shoulders and scars covering his arms and face. His amber eyes were cold and calculating as they fixed on Amy. Behind him came 5 other Zarthak warriors, all carrying weapons and looking ready for battle. They spread out in a semicircle, effectively trapping Amy against the stream. Zitor said something in the Zarthak language, his voice deep and commanding. Amy didn't understand the words, but his tone was clearly angry. "He wants to know why I allow a small human to touch me," Vextar translated, his voice embarrassed. Amy continued working on the infection, not looking up from her task. "Tell him I'm helping you heal properly, so you can get back to being a strong warrior." Vextar translated, but Zitor's response was even angrier. He stepped closer, looming over Amy like a mountain of fur and muscle. "He says warriors do not need help from prey creatures," Vextar said. "He says I bring shame to our pack by acting weak." Amy finally looked up at the war chief. He was intimidating, but she had dealt with aggressive animals before. The key was to show confidence without appearing threatening. "Your brother was trapped under a tree and bleeding," Amy said calmly, addressing Zitor directly, even though he probably couldn't understand her. He would have died from infection if someone hadn't helped him. There's no shame in accepting help when you need it. Zitor made a sound that was half growl, half laugh. He said something that made the other Warriors chuckle. What did he say? Amy asked. Vextar looked uncomfortable. He says you speak boldly for something so small and weak. He wonders if you understand that he could kill you with one swipe of his claws. Amy stood up slowly, putting herself between Ziegler and the medical supplies. She looked the massive war chief directly in the eyes. I understand that you're trying to scare me, she said. But I'm not afraid of you. You want to know why? Because I've seen how your people behave when they're hurt and scared. You act tough and dangerous, but underneath you're just like any other creature that needs care and healing. Vextar translated, and Ziegler's expression changed. His eyes narrowed, and Amy could see his claws extending slightly. Be careful, Amy, Vextar warned. You challenge his authority. But Amy had learned something important during her weeks. With Vextar, Zarthak culture was built around dominance and submission. They respected strength, but they defined strength differently than humans did. I'm not challenging his authority, Amy said. I'm showing him that strength comes in different forms. She turned back to Vextar and continued treating his infection, completely ignoring the war chief and his warriors. Hold still, she told Vextar. This needs to be cleaned properly, or it will get worse. Ziegler watched in amazement as his younger brother, a warrior who had fought in dozens of battles, obediently sat still while a tiny human female scolded him like a misbehaving cub dot when Vextar tried to pull away because the antiseptic stung. Amy grabbed his arm firmly. Stop moving, she said in the same tone she had used on countless injured animals. I know it hurts, but you need to be brave for just a little longer. The other warriors exchanged glances. In their culture, only pack leaders spoke to warriors with such authority. Only the strongest members of their society could command obedience. Through tone of voice alone, Amy finished cleaning the infection and began applying a healing salve she had learned to make from local plants. There, she said, patting Vextar's shoulder gently. That should feel better soon. Ziegler said something to Vextar, his voice puzzled rather than angry now. He asks why I obey you, Vextar translated. He says I am a warrior, not a cub. Amy thought about how to explain. During her time with Vextar, she had learned that Zarthak society was like a giant wolf pack. Everyone had their place in the hierarchy, and that place was determined by strength and dominance. Tell him that I'm not trying to dominate anyone. Amy said, I'm trying to help. In my culture, helping others is a sign of strength, not weakness. As Vextar translated, Amy noticed that one of the other warriors had a poorly healed wound on his leg. It looked infected and was clearly causing him pain, though he was trying to hide it. Without asking permission, Amy walked over to the injured warrior. He stepped back, startled, but Amy held up her hands to show she meant no harm. Let me see that, she said, pointing to his leg. The warrior looked to Ziegler for guidance. The war chief studied Amy for a long moment, then gave a slight nod. Amy knelt down and examined the wound. It was worse than she had thought, infected and festering. Without proper treatment, it could become serious enough to threaten the warriors. Life, this is bad, she said, looking up at Ziegler. He needs help right away. She opened her medical kit and began cleaning the wound. The warrior growled with pain, but he didn't try to stop her. Amy worked quickly and efficiently, drawing on all her veterinary training as she worked. Amy began to understand something important about Zarthak culture. They valued strength above all else, but they had a narrow definition of what strength meant. To them, asking for help was a sign of weakness. Showing pain was weakness. Admitting you couldn't handle something alone was weakness, but Amy's approach confused them. She wasn't asking them to be weak. She was simply refusing to let them suffer when she could help. In my world, Amy said as she bandaged the warrior's leg, we have a saying, The strongest trees are the ones that bend in the wind instead of breaking, Vextar translated, and Amy could see the warriors thinking about this idea. Your culture values individual strength, Amy continued, but sometimes the strongest thing you can do is accept help so you can become even stronger. When she finished treating the warrior's leg, Amy stood up and faced Ziekter again. Your people are brave and powerful, she said, but you're fighting battles against infection and injury that you don't need to fight alone. Ziekter said something long and complex to Vextar. He wants to know what you gain from helping us, Vextar. Translated. In our culture, everything has a price. Everything is about dominance or territory or resources. He doesn't understand why you help without asking for anything in return. Amy smiled. Tell him that helping others makes me stronger too. When I see someone in pain and I can fix it, that makes me feel good. It makes me feel like I'm doing what I was meant to do. This concept seemed to puzzle Ziekter even more. He had spent his entire life in a world where every action was about gaining advantage over others. The idea of helping someone just because it felt right was completely foreign to him. Over the next hour, Amy treated minor injuries on 3 more warriors, while Ziekter watched. Each time she worked with the same calm confidence, scolding them when they fidgeted and praising them when they held still. The warriors began to relax around her. They started making jokes and comparing their bandages like children showing off their scraped knees. Your pack brothers are very brave, Amy told Vextar. They handle pain well. When Vextar translated this, the warriors stood a little straighter. Amy had found their weakness. They were proud of their toughness, and her praise made them want to be even tougher. As the sun began to set, Ziekter gathered his warriors to leave. But before they went, he said something to Amy directly, his voice softer than before. He says you are not what he expected, Vextar translated. He calls you small pack mother who makes warriors behave. Amy laughed. Is that good or bad? Very good, Vextar said. Pack mothers are highly respected. They have authority over all warriors when it comes to health and healing. Ziekter said something else, pointing to Amy and then to the crystal forest. He says, other packs have heard about you, Vextar translated, looking excited. They want to see the human who treats warriors like cubs. Some have injured members who need help. Amy felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Do you think they'll be friendly? Vextar grinned, showing his sharp teeth. They will test you, like we did. But if you treat them the same way you treat us, they will learn to respect you. As the warriors disappeared into the forest, Amy packed up her medical supplies. She had learned something important today. The Zarthek weren't naturally aggressive or hostile. They were just trying to understand where humans fit in their world. And somehow, by simply being herself, caring, determined, and unafraid to scold injured warriors like they were misbehaving pets, Amy had found her place in their society. She was becoming something that had never existed before, a human pack mother, with all the authority and respect that title carried in Zarthek culture. The crystal Vextar had given her seemed to glow brighter as she walked back to the ship, as if it approved of the day's events. Tomorrow, Amy knew, would bring new challenges, and new injured warriors to help Dot. She was ready for both. Word spread quickly through the crystal forests about the small human who could make warriors obey like cubs. Within a week of Ziekter's visit, Amy found herself facing a steady stream of injured Zarthek from different packs and clans. The first to arrive was an elderly female named Kekshra from the mountain pack. She limped into the clearing where Amy usually met Vextar, supported by 2 younger warriors. Her left arm hung uselessly at her side, and Amy could see that it had been broken and healed badly. She is pack mother of Mountain Clan, Vextar explained to Amy. Very important. She comes because her arm causes much pain, but mountain pack. Healers cannot fix old injury. Amy approached Kexra carefully. The elderly Zarthake was smaller than the warriors, but carried herself with great dignity. Her amber eyes were sharp and intelligent, studying Amy with keen interest. "May I examine your arm?" Amy asked, speaking slowly and clearly. Kexra said something in the Zarthik language, her tone formal but not unfriendly. "She says she has heard you scold warriors like misbehaving cubs." Vextar translated with amusement. "She wants to see if you will treat a pack mother the same way." Amy smiled and gently took Kexra's injured arm. The bones had healed crookily, and scar tissue was pressing on nerves, causing constant pain. It would require careful work with the healing device to break down the old scar tissue and allow the bones to realign properly. "This will take time," Amy said, "and it will hurt before it gets better. Are you willing to be patient?" When Vextar translated, Kexra made a sound that was clearly laughter. She said something that made even the serious warrior smile. "She says she has been patient for 3 seasons already," Vextar explained. "She asks if you think she will give up now because of a little more pain." Amy worked on Kexra's arm for over an hour, using the healing device to carefully break down scar tissue and guide the bones back into proper alignment. Kexra never made a sound of complaint, even when Amy knew the treatment was causing significant pain. "You're very tough," Amy said admiringly. "Tougher than most of the warriors I've treated." When this was translated, Kexra's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. She said something long and complex to Vextar. "She says she likes you," Vextar told Amy. "She says you work like a true pack mother. You see what needs to be done, and you do it without fear or hesitation. She asks if you would be willing to teach other Zarthek to use healing devices the way you do." Amy looked up from her work, surprised. "She wants me to teach others?" "Pack mothers share knowledge," Vextar explained. "It is how our people survive and grow stronger. She sees that you have skills that could help many Zarthek." Over the following days, Amy found herself running an informal medical school in the Crystal Forest. Kexra brought several young Zarthek who were interested in learning healing arts. Amy taught them how to properly calibrate the healing devices, how to recognize different types of injuries, and most importantly, how to care for patients with gentleness as well as skill. The young Zarthek were eager students. They had sharp minds and quick hands, and they already knew much about their own biology and healing technology. What Amy taught them was a different approach, one that focused on the comfort and emotional well-being of patients, as well as their physical recovery. "Pain makes healing slower," Amy explained to her students one afternoon. "If you can make a patient feel safe and comfortable, their body will heal faster and better." This was a revolutionary concept for the Zarthek. Their traditional healing methods were fast but harsh, designed to get warriors back into battle as quickly as possible. Amy's gentler approach produced better long-term results, with fewer complications and less scarring. Captain Jake Morrison and the rest of Amy's crew watched these developments with amazement. What had started as a dangerous solo mission to help one injured alien had turned into a full-scale medical and cultural exchange program. "I can't believe what I'm seeing," Lisa said, observing Amy's teaching session through binoculars from the ship. "She's essentially become the leader of a multi-species medical team." Pete shook his head in wonder. "Those warriors outweigh her by 300 pounds each, and they follow her instructions like she's their commanding officer." Amy's reputation continued to grow. Warriors from distant clans began making pilgrimages to the Crystal Forest to receive treatment from the human Pack Mother. They brought gifts, crystals, metal tools, and artistic objects from their various territories. Amy accepted the gifts graciously, but always insisted that healing was not something to be bought or sold. "I help because you need help," she would. Tell them through Vexstar's translation. That's what pack mothers do. This attitude only increased their respect for her. In Zarthic culture, power was usually used for personal gain. A leader who gave freely without asking for anything in return was unprecedented and deeply impressive. One day, Amy was treating a warrior with an infected bite wound when Ziekter arrived with news that would change everything. "The Great Council has heard about you," he announced through Vexstar's translation. "They want to meet the human who commands warriors through healing." Amy looked up from her patient, confused. "What's the Great Council?" "Leaders of all major Zarthak clans," Vexstar explained. "They make decisions about war, territory, and law. They have never met with aliens before. They want to see if you are truly what the stories say," Ziekter continued. "Some think you use magic or trickery to control warriors. Others believe you are a new kind of pack leader that Zarthik have never encountered." Amy felt nervous about meeting such important leaders, but she also saw an opportunity. "If I meet with them, can I ask them to help me establish a proper medical center? Somewhere clean and safe where injured Zarthik can come for treatment?" When this was translated, Ziekter's eyebrows rose. "You want to make permanent healing place?" "Yes," Amy said firmly. "Right now I'm working out in the forest with basic supplies. If we had a real medical facility, I could help more Zarthik and train more healers." Ziekter considered this for a long moment. "The council will find this request interesting. You ask for resources to help others, not to gain power for yourself." Over. The next few days, Amy prepared for the most important meeting of her life. Kexra and several other pack mothers offered to accompany her, which Vexstar said was a great honor. "Pack mothers supporting you shows the council that you are accepted by our most respected females," he explained. "This gives you much authority." Amy also received support from an unexpected source. Captain Morrison and her human crewmates offered to attend the meeting as well. "You've accomplished something incredible here," Jake told her. "You've built bridges between our species that no diplomat could have managed. We want to support you in any way we can." The day of the Great Council meeting, Amy put on her best uniform and gathered her medical supplies. She had decided to bring the healing device that Vexstar had taught her to use, along with some of the improved techniques she had developed as they walked toward the sacred meeting ground deep in the crystal forest. Amy reflected on how much had changed since that first disastrous encounter. She had started out just wanting to help one injured warrior. Now she was about to propose a formal alliance between humans and Zarthak based on shared medical knowledge and mutual care. "Are you nervous?" Vexstar asked as they approached the meeting site. Amy looked at the massive crystal structure ahead. Of them were dozens of powerful Zarthak leaders were waiting to judge her. She thought about all the injured warriors she had helped, all the students she had taught, and all the trust she had built one patient at a time. "A little," she admitted, "but I know what I'm doing is right. Sometimes that's all the courage you need." Vexstar smiled, showing his sharp teeth. "You sound like a true pack mother. The council will see this." As they entered the crystal chamber where the Great Council waited, Amy carried herself with the confidence she had learned from weeks of commanding respect through healing. She was no longer just a young communications officer from Earth. She was Amy Foster, pack mother to warriors, teacher of healers, and bridge between species. And she was ready to show the Great Council exactly what that meant. The crystal chamber fell silent as she entered, dozens of amber eyes fixed on the small human who had somehow convinced their mightiest warriors to behave like obedient cubs. Amy stood straight and met their gazes without fear. The real test was about to begin. The Great Council chamber was unlike anything Amy had ever seen. The walls were made of living crystal that pulsed with soft blue light, and the ceiling stretched high above them like a cathedral. 24 of the most powerful Zarthak leaders sat in a circle, their amber eyes fixed on Amy. As she entered, at the center of the circle sat the eldest leader, a massive Zarthak with silver-gray fur and scars that spoke of countless battles. This was Elder Thekmer, the supreme leader of all Zarthak clans. Amy walked to the center of the circle with Vexstar beside her. Captain Morrison, Lisa, and Pete followed at a respectful distance. The silence in the chamber was so complete that Amy could hear her own heartbeat. Elder Thekmer spoke first, his voice deep and commanding. The ancient language rolled through the crystal chamber like thunder. "He welcomes you to the Great Council," Vexstar translated quietly. "He says many stories have reached his ears about the small human who commands warriors. He wants to see if these stories are true." Amy stepped forward and bowed respectfully. "I am honored to meet the Great Council. I come here not to command anyone, but to offer help and friendship between our peoples." When Vexstar translated, several council members made sounds of surprise. Elder Thekmer's eyebrows rose slightly. "He says your words are unusual," Vexstar explained. "Most who seek audience with the council ask for territory or resources. You speak of giving rather than taking." Another council member, a scarred female with missing claws, spoke up with obvious skepticism in her voice. "War Chief Kala questions whether your healing methods are real or some form of trickery," Vexstar translated. "She says no creature helps." Others without expecting something in return. Amy had expected this challenge. She opened her medical kit and pulled out the Zarthak healing device she had learned to use. "May I demonstrate?" she asked. Elder Thekmer nodded permission. Amy looked around the circle of leaders and noticed that many of them bore old injuries and scars. Her eyes settled on a younger council member whose right leg was clearly causing him pain. Every few minutes, he shifted his weight, trying to find a comfortable position. "You have an old injury in your leg," Amy said, addressing him directly. "It heals poorly and causes constant pain, yes?" The young leader, whose name was Dexcar, looked surprised that she had noticed. He nodded reluctantly. "May I help?" Amy asked. Dexcar looked to Elder Thekmer, who gave a slight nod. Amy knelt beside the young leader and carefully examined his leg. It was an old break that had healed crookily, similar to what she had seen in Kexrai's arm as Amy worked with the healing device. She began talking softly to Dexcar, the same way she spoke to all her patients. "This will sting a little at first, but then it should start to feel better. You've been very patient with this pain." The council watched in fascination as Amy carefully realigned the old break and used the healing energy to encourage proper bone growth. Dexcar's expression changed from skepticism to amazement as the constant ache in his leg began to fade. "How does it feel now?" Amy asked when she finished. Dexcar stood up and tested his weight on the leg. For the first time in years, he could stand without pain. He said something to the council in an awed voice. "He says the pain is gone," Vexstar translated. "He asks how you learned to use our healing technology better than our own healers." Amy packed up the device carefully. "I didn't learn to use it better. I learned to use it differently. Your healers focus on speed and getting warriors back to battle quickly. I focus on complete healing and long-term health." Elder Thekmer leaned forward, clearly interested. He asked a long question. He wants to know what you seek in return for this knowledge. Vexstar translated. Amy thought about her answer. This was the crucial moment that would determine the future. Relationship between humans and Zarthak. "I seek the chance to build something new," she said. "A place where humans and Zarthak can work together, sharing knowledge and helping each other. A medical center where anyone who is hurt can come for healing, regardless of which pack or species they belong to." The translation caused excited murmuring throughout the council. This was clearly not what they had expected. War Chief Kala spoke again, her tone less skeptical than before. "She asks what humans gain from such an arrangement," Vextar explained. "She wants to know if this is some form of conquest through kindness." Amy smiled. "Humans gain the same thing Zarthak gain. We learn from each other. Your healing technology is far advanced beyond ours. Your knowledge of biology and medicine could help humans stay healthy in space. In return, we can share our approaches to healing and our experience with different types of creatures." Captain Morrison stepped forward. "If I may speak," he said. Amy nodded, and Vextar translated for the council. "My people sent us to explore space and find new worlds," Jake said. "We hoped to find intelligent life, but we never imagined we would find friends and partners. Amy has shown us that cooperation is stronger than conquest. We would be honored to work with the Zarthak as equals and allies." Elder Thekmer sat in silence for several minutes, considering. Finally, he spoke. "He says your proposal is unprecedented," Vextar translated. "Never before have two species offered to share knowledge as equals. Always one seeks to dominate the other." The elder asked Amy a direct question, his amber eyes intense. "He wants to know if you would stay here and establish this medical center yourself, or if you would return to your own people and send others." Amy felt her heart racing. This was the moment she had been preparing for, without even knowing it. "I would stay," she said without hesitation. "This is where I'm needed. This is where I can do the most good." The council erupted in discussion. Amy could see some members nodding approvingly, while others looked skeptical. Elder Thekmer raised his hand for silence. He spoke for several minutes, his words formal and ceremonial. "He declares that you are hereby recognized as the first interspecies pack mother," Vextar translated, his voice filled with excitement. "You will be given resources to build your medical center. Zarthak healers will study with you, and human healers will be welcome to learn from us." Amy felt tears of joy welling up in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered Dot, but Elder Thekmer wasn't finished. He continued speaking, and Vextar's translation became more emotional. "He says that from this day forward, humans and Zarthak are allied peoples. We will share knowledge, protect each other's territories, and work together to explore the stars." The council chamber erupted in howls of approval. Amy found herself surrounded by massive Zarthak warriors, offering their claws in friendship. 6 months later, Amy stood in the main treatment room of the Foster Thekmer Interspecies Medical Center, named after her and the elder who had made it possible. The facility was built from living crystal that provided perfect sterile conditions, with equipment that combined the best of human and Zarthak technology. Her staff included 12 Zarthak healers and 8 human doctors who had volunteered to join her. They worked together seamlessly, sharing techniques and knowledge that benefited both species. Amy was examining a young Zarthik who had injured his paw in a climbing accident when Vextar approached with a smile. "Another message from Earth," he said, holding up a communication device. "This time it's from the Universal Veterinary College. They want to offer you an honorary doctorate in xenobiology." Amy laughed as she bandaged the young Zarthak's paw. "Tell them I'm honored, but I'm a little busy right now." The youngster tried to pull away from her touch, and Amy gently but firmly held his paw still. "Now, what did you naughty creatures do to yourselves this time?" she said in the same tone she had used with Vextar so many months ago. The phrase had become something of a joke among the Zarthak. Young ones would sometimes hurt themselves on purpose, just to hear the human pack mother scold them with those familiar words. As Amy finished treating her patient, she looked around the medical center with satisfaction. Humans and Zarthak worked side by side, sharing laughter and knowledge. In the research wing, joint teams were developing new healing techniques that neither species could have created alone. No regrets? Vexstar asked, following her gaze. Amy thought about the letter from veterinary school that had arrived just that morning. She had been accepted with full honors, but she had politely declined. She had found something better than veterinary school. She had found her calling as a healer and bridge between worlds. None at all, she said. This is exactly where I belong. Outside the medical center, human and Zarthek children played together. In the crystal gardens, their laughter echoing off the living walls. The future was bright with possibilities, and it had all started with a simple act of kindness toward one injured creature who needed help. Amy Foster had proven that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from fighting, but from the courage to reach out and heal. And in doing so, she had changed the galaxy forever.